Good morning, everybody. 7:20 in the morning in New York, so a warm welcome from New York. Very strange that we just kick off without having an audience. I hope everybody is safe and a healthy and prosperous new year to everyone. My name is Simon Moss. I'm CEO of Ayasdi. Next 20 minutes or so, maybe about 15 minutes, talking about some of the projects that we've been doing. Certainly there's no hard sell for Ayasdi during this session. If you want to know more about us, please go visit us in the exhibit hall. This is more sharing some of the perspectives that we've had. We have decided over the last year or so to invest in a completely different approach to identifying financial crime. We have a very big history and thoroughbred in oncological research and in pharmaceutical research, really massive amounts of data, looking for weak signals in that data that could indicate specific malignancies. We've taken those teams, we've taken those orthogonal thought processes and imposed them with a couple of extremely large and very brave banking institutions globally to really look at their data and say, are there biomarkers? Is there a way for us to find behaviors that are deliberately being hidden? And the characterization of those behaviors, and really using a molecular analysis approach to try and identify them. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we found and talk a little bit about the general characterization of AML and financial crime not being a technology issue, but being more of a cultural and organizational issue. So please feel free to ask questions as we go through, and hopefully the next 15 minutes or so will be of some interest. Number one, breakthroughs in any technology, and we do sincerely believe at Ayasdi that we have a breakthrough, no doubt about it, both in the efficacy of the behaviors that are being found, the malignancies and penetration that many organized and opportunistic crime are imposing on financial institutions, but also the operational efficiency and the performance of the unit using the technology. But no matter how good the technology is, it won't work without a clear organizational discipline, a focus on process, a focus on clear subject matter expertise, and a tone from the top in which the banks register clearly that it is not a rule of law issue when it comes to financial crime. It's a spirit of the law that executing as a financial institution against financial crime should be part of the brand rather than simply an analytical challenge to satisfy some regulatory requirements. The way financial crime interdiction has grown up has gone from a manual process 30 years ago to the implementation of deterministic rules in the early 2000s. These, frankly, are over-determined at this point. They're still valuable, but they are frankly being outmaneuvered. There is a new generation of artificial intelligence, machine learning, unsupervised and supervised algorithmic approaches to discovering malignancies that are much better hidden. These are based in really two areas. One, supervised machine learning, which really is an addition to rules-based learning. It is based on the subject matter expertise or the knowledge of the data scientists and what they're looking for. So you have to define what you're looking for, which is brilliant for finding a needle in a haystack because you know what you're looking for. But it isn't good for finding a needle in a stack of needles, which is trying to identify things that are trying to look the same as everybody else, things that are being innocuous, things that are deliberately being hidden. That becomes much more problematic. And that's really where Ayasdi decided to focus, to say, this is what we want to use, unsupervised as well as supervised machine learning, to begin to find probabilistically behaviors that are deliberately being hidden within the noise. Now, the best way to do that isn't necessarily the algorithmic way. The best way to do that is to really look at the data in a much different, more angular and more lensed approach. And so feature generation is an area that we invested a very, very considerable amount of effort in, as we said, using the pharma and oncological teams that have already took through huge amounts of analytical approaches to look at molecular structures and molecular malignancies. So feature generation in a transaction monitoring system, one of the standard ones, probably about 50 to 60. Why? Because they have to be well written down and well articulated within a rule structure. Supervised machine learning, because it's a little freer, it's about 250. Specific features that the data is being aligned to. Within Ayasdi, we start our projects at 20 to 30,000 different projects, different features, really analyzing the data at multiple different levels, and creating multiple different perspectives on how the data can be viewed, and then applying analytical techniques to it. Now, does this, the question that everybody says, well, you don't need the rules anymore. Actually, you do need the rules. The rules are incredibly valuable, and they also form a rung in a ladder. And so when technology companies would say, oh, you know, all the old stuff's all been a waste of time, it doesn't work anymore, it's outmaneuvered. No, that's not actually true. The discipline, particularly in model validation and the documentation evidence that is used, that we've built up over the last 20 years, is incredibly valuable for making the more powerful, admittedly more powerful, artificial intelligence-based inference and probabilistic models clear to understand and clearly articulated. But it all starts with a massive approach to uncovering, unwrapping, and realigning data and all the intricacies. Because as soon as the data begins to tell its story, you can begin to find these behaviors that are being hidden. But subject matter expertise remains critical. Ayasdi is finding a set of behaviors across the entire spectrum, the entire topography of the client's data. But is that real crime? And really being able to assimilate deep subject matter expertise into the analytical techniques, into the outputs, into the process is critical. Establishing a process that is clearly explainable, is clearly validated, so that when you call Simon Moss and say, hey, and we're not banking with you anymore because you're a bloody crook, you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it. Tone from the top is also mission critical as far as we are concerned. This is a mission. This isn't an analytical challenge. This isn't a regulatory reporting challenge. This is a challenge that is impactful to our adversaries. The role of the anti-money laundering officer, the role of the Bank Secrecy Act, the role of the CAMPLO is as impactful to our adversaries as some bloke sitting in a tank in a desert somewhere. We have an opportunity in executing the spirit in the law to disrupt and dismantle some of the most heinous human activities imaginable. This isn't just a financial crime. This is terrorism. This is pedophilia. This is sex trafficking. This is people that take advantage of the poor and the lonely around the planet. And so tone from the top, from the banking institutions, is extremely important. And then finally, and I think we made great progress 20 years ago, giving my age away, but less so since then, is market collaboration. But two leaders, certainly the Canadian banking system in the way they're working with the hotels and working with the airline industry in their task force in tackling human trafficking, is a benchmark. And it's also fantastic to see the Dutch banks all beginning to collaborate, early days, embryonic for sure, but beginning to collaborate to say many of the things, we are all being attacked. It is a systemic problem, and our adversaries are actually divide and conquer. And so collaboration is an area that we seek to stimulate with many of our customers in sharing specific types of information. Now, how did we do it? Well, some humility was really, I think, a good word. Ayasdi has a background and a great reputation in topological data analysis. We saw that as a really cool keyhole. We could see quite a lot through the door to see who's on the other side. But other firms had other elements as well that were also similarly of value. And we all end up in this philosophical argument of whose is better and whose isn't. Well, that's garbage. So what we did was we took them all. And we brought in subject matter expertise, and we really said, how does a transaction monitoring rule system work? How do we integrate that with temporal behavior or sequential time series within the alignment that we're looking at in compliance? How does network analysis and beneficial ownership structures work? How does anomaly detection and outlier detection associated with link analysis, how does all that fit together? In other words, we built and aligned and orchestrated a set of analytical lenses that allowed us to look at the 20 to 30 to 40 to 50,000 features that our unsupervised engine was created, so that we could really look into the data, not at the data, into it, through it, to allow the data to navigate us through the process and identify signals that were incredibly weak, that were deliberately hidden, that were deliberately obtuse, to really, but allow us to target them to say, actually, everybody else has ignored this. Everything else has ignored this. Everything else has dismissed this. But this is a really important biomarker that says that something has happened here. So what Ayasdi has done, it's brought in machine learning. It's respected the legacy of the rule to add the discipline and explainability that's been needed. It has focused at bringing in multiple different algorithmic approaches, orchestrated it in that one alignment. And then most importantly, it has created an approach that looks at data and doesn't say, hold on a minute, I need 250 to 300 different features to analyze. We have said, let the system, let the software create as many connections, as many features as possible, so that we can really drill in and find those behaviors. So lots of different discoveries have happened. False positives at this point are 5 false positives to every L3 or SAR. The average market at the moment is between 35 and 45. Discovering multiple new behaviors, multiple new attacks that, frankly, our clients weren't aware of. And we want to thank our customers, and we'll be announcing some things in the next couple of weeks. So we want to thank these very brave bankers who said, no, the rule of the law, just executing and making the regulators happy is not our job. The spirit of the law is to try and disrupt and interdict on the individuals that seek to harm us. So we want to thank them. But some 3 examples that came out of this. Number one, it's surprisingly intertwined, financial crime. It's not money laundering. And we found networks of multiple crimes connected together through single groups of collusion. I'll cover that a little bit more. Sanctions still remains a challenge, as does correspondent banking, as does KYC efficiencies. That's really where we're beginning to focus now. And COVID is stimulating a whole new Trojan horse in account takeover. But there is actually some good news where that's concerned as well. So to cover these 3 over the next 5 minutes or so, but please bear in mind, in the end, and it's a weird thing perhaps for a technology CEO to say, in the end, the technology is not the silver bullet. In the end is the discipline, the rigor, the subject matter expertise, the motivation, and the tone of the anti-money laundering and financial crimes unit to actually execute and implement. Went the wrong way. Oh, no, I didn't. That's me and my wonderful PowerPoint. Causality of crime. Yes, everybody knows that money laundering is not associated with just the laundering itself, but the degree of causality between crime was, well, remarkable, I think is a good way to say it. And this is one extremely simple network. But on average, we found 7 additional financial crimes to every laundering dollar. This is one that we found, basic laundering, but then there was organized unemployment fraud, particularly out of the Caribbean. A huge amount being driven into it, and this is being stimulated at the moment by many of the stimulus and unemployment payments that are coming from the central governments. That was then driven. There was a very significant, and these are the same groups of people. They're different names, they're associated differently, but this is the same network of individuals. Healthcare claims fraud, insurance fraud, particularly in motor car insurance, credit card fraud as the primary asset for getting cash out to individuals. But this was also then driven, and this connection was into East Africa, a large amount of phishing and cybercrime. And then finally, a huge degree of identity theft that included false passport generation. This is one network. Within the bank that we were talking with, this was 3 different business units. This was 5 different technologies. This was massive amounts of heterogeneous databases, but none of it was connected together. So each one of these units could see one portion of the crime. We, through our approach, connected it all together. Employees. It's a difficult thing to say, but there was significantly more internal malfeasance and corruption than we thought. So we created two new elements: risk-weighted incentive programs. How is the incentive structure, particularly in private banking, particularly in relationship management, how is that really focused and driving the right behaviors? And then we establish a role corruption exposure, which is essentially a matrix of roles within the institution and to what degree they can be corrupted. High up there was actually the offshore investigation units. Certainly the level 1 and level 2 teams are of significant focus by organized crime. We moved investigation offshore because of the volumes, because we needed to reduce the amount of cost. That has actually exposed those individuals quite considerably. So a couple of new metrics to look at. COVID itself is also driving different behaviors. We're looking at massive amounts of account takeover in New York, Los Angeles. We've seen things in Italy. We've seen them in the Asia Pacific region as well. There's a lot of IP and we're giving away here, but it doesn't really matter because there's significantly more complexity behind it. But three things to really look at, and this maps to what was said earlier. Changing legal and accounting representation or documentation is fairly easy to catch. But no notification, the bottom from third from the bottom, no notification of material change from the relationship manager is a giant red flag that you've got an internal collusion issue. And so we're looking at significant numbers of very good businesses that are essentially saying, we don't quite know what to do. And then individuals, large amounts of cash. And remember, many businesses are currently closed down. So the traditional distribution mechanisms of laundering are frankly closed down. So there's large amounts of cash in the system. Now that's given us an opportunity that large amount of cash is going to be flooded into the system once the COVID economy goes away and everybody starts opening up again. But we are going to be stuck with a boatload of Trojan horses. And I'll be very honest, if I have a family business and I'm in trouble and somebody decides to buy the company for cash, 70 cents on the dollar, I'll sell it. And we've got a real issue in how that's going to be managed in such a way that we can catch this. Otherwise, we have institutionalized, or we've allowed to institutionalize loads and loads of shell companies that look perfectly normal and have simply changed ownership without us actually knowing about it. So distressed business takeover is an area of significant concern. We've been finding a lot of it, but we're also finding that there is a lot of cash going to be piling up and waiting to come into the system over the next year or so that gives us all an opportunity to discover a lot of malfeasance and a lot of behaviors that wouldn't have been discovered otherwise. Lots of other questions come to us, and I wanted to just finish this off around some of the other questions that we're being asked. These are all here. I'm not going to answer them all. I'll just answer the three in red. Cloud adoption, we've got to get there. Ayasdi runs on all three clouds. We're very happy with it. We think it's incredibly secure. We're HIPAA compliant security, given our background, and therefore cloud is an area of considerable value and considerable efficacy for the whole market. More importantly, though, I started this conversation saying we're being outmaneuvered by our adversaries. They're more dynamic, they're more creative. Well, they are. And to a certain degree, what is holding us back is the way that we implement our software, the way we implement our technology. Cloud is going to give us an opportunity to manage and create new rules on the fly, to validate new opportunities, to create creativity directly from our subject matter experts into our analytical teams, and manage it in a robust, secure enterprise class environment, rather than having to put an on-prem deployment, wait for a software company to deliver its roadmap years down the road on something that is existentially important now. Cloud gives us that opportunity. The regulators, what are they doing? Well, AMLA 21, we all know about. The EU 5th and 6th directive is pushing quite well. And I think that we are beginning to see significant interest in the adoption of new technologies. I think the regulators are begun to realize, well, maybe we're not doing as well as we should be doing. We have to really begin to push the banks and not just stimulate them to say, hey, try to innovate, but really begin to say, well, what is the value here? And how do we integrate that into the exams? Therein there's the challenge. I think there's a lot of central sentiment. We're not seeing it filter down to the local examination yet. And then model validation, I think, is still a problem. We need to bring specifically the third-party model validation teams up to a level that understands modern explainability. Ayasdi was presented at Davos by the Singapore government last year, being the most explainable AI engine on the planet. We have multiple patents around explainability. Our explainability is to the level of granularity and specificity as a rule or technical scenario document to explain the rule. And yet, when the word AI comes up, it still stimulates a challenge, and it shouldn't. So that's it. 20 minutes. I think I did quite well. Oh wow, it was exactly 20 minutes. And so I talked a little bit longer than I could. Hopefully there are some questions. Please feel free to send me any questions. My email is simon.moss@ayasdi.com. I look forward to talking to some of you guys in the event hall. And thanks very much for investing the time. Oh, and wash your hands. Oh, I have a question. Does it replace the TMS? No, it can do. But, you know, we think the rules are pretty good as they are. So we're cool. We're sitting on top of the TMS using exactly the same data as the TMS does. So, you know, frictionless deployment. You want to get rid of the old steam engine of a TMS? Yeah, feel free. We're cool with it. We have all the rules integrated already. You know, but that can be politically hard work. So sort the false positives out on the TMS, put our optimization engine in, and then put our discovery engine on top of it and augment the two and get the best of both worlds. So thanks for that question. Oh, right. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.